Stock Exchange Mining Masterclass. I'm hoping that you can all hear me clearly. Just confirm if my audio is clear to you.
Yeah, yes, it is clear.
Okay, thank you, Justin. I see Mr. Mapwedza is also in the meeting. Okay, perhaps we'll do the introductions while we wait for other colleagues to join. So my name is Enemo Tarwinga. I'm the head of business development for the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, but today I'm putting on the cap for the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. We have got a wonderful panel that will be taking us through today's session. We'll have a presentation, in introductory remarks from the Chief Executive Officer for the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, Justin Boni. And then we'll have a presentation from the Chamber of Mines, represented by the CEO, Mr. Isaac Kwesu. And we'll also have a financial advisor coming through from Imara Capital, Mr. Sean Gammon. And we'll then finally have the final presentation from Eastern Shoniwa, who is a broker with Southern Trust Securities. So that's the list of the panelists that will be taking us through today's session. Just to give you a brief background in terms of what we are trying to achieve, I'm sure my colleagues will illustrate and give further flesh to it. But we are basically coming to present to you on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange and focusing on the mining companies and how they can be part and parcel of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. VFEX was launched sometime last year in October, and it's an exchange which Justin will explain how it's expected to operate. But to summarize, we are focusing on export-oriented and USD generating businesses, of which the mining sector is perfectly fits into that category. So we know that we have got abundant resources in this country, and mining sector is one of the biggest contributors to our export earnings. It's also one of the biggest contributors to the GDP, and if you look at employment-wise, it's also one of the biggest sectors. But its representation, I think, on capital markets has always been lagging, despite its close association with the capital markets. If you look at the origins of our capital markets, they were all born out of a mining era back then before the 1900s. The first stock exchanges were premised on the basis that they were there to support capital, to provide capital to the mining companies that had been established. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, let me not take much of your time. Allow me now to give room to the CEO for the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, Mr. Justin Boni, to give the VFEX overview and just share with you why we are going through and setting up, why we went through and set up that exchange and what we are trying to achieve and how we can partner with the mining sector in as far as capital raising is concerned. Justin, it's over to you.
Thank you, Enemo. Good morning, everyone. I'm just wondering whether you can see my presentation.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks very much. Good morning to everyone. So my name is Justin Boni. I'm the CEO of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange / ZSE. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to give you an overview of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, what our thinking was when we set it up, and how it can help you, just laying out the groundwork for the rest of my colleagues who are going to go into more detail on how you can utilize the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange to achieve your capital needs.
Sorry, Justin, if I might just intervene. Colleagues, okay. If you can mute your mics, we are getting some feedback. So if you can mute your mics as the presentations are being shared, then perhaps we can then unmute when the question and answer section arises. Thank you. You can go ahead, Justin.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm moving. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the presentation. I'm going to do an introduction of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, the advantages of listing on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, why we believe mining companies are ideal candidates to list on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, the key risks whenever you do a project like this, there are risks and how we are trying to mitigate them, and more importantly, why we believe the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will work. So in terms of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is a 100% subsidiary of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. It operates separately from ZSC. It operates in the Victoria Falls CBD currently, and in the medium to long term is for it to migrate to the Special Economic Zone in the Victoria Falls, which has been earmarked for financial services. As I said, it's currently 100% owned by the ZSC, but in the long term, the plans are to bring a technical partner, either in form of an international exchange or international fund manager to help manage the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange and give it more access to different capital providers. Why did we think of VFEX? There are three main reasons. The first one is we understand, especially a sector like yours, mining, that you actually need hard currency to expand or to start companies. So we know that if you to get the money on ZSC, it's more difficult then to convert that money to hard currency. So it makes sense for mining companies from outright to raise money in the hard currency. The second reason was to reduce exchange control risks, especially for foreign investors, because if they invest in USD and get their returns in US dollars, then they minimize the risk, exchange control risk. And this is particularly important in Africa. If we talk to a lot of foreign investors, they will tell you that even if their the investment does well, sometimes you lose quite a bit in terms of exchange risk. So that's one of the reasons. Then the other one is also in terms of exchange control risk as well. If it's in US dollars, it's easier for foreign investors to repatriate their money. For at the moment, if they are invested on ZSC, when they sell, then they have to change that money into hard currency, and it's a bit more difficult. So if straight away they get hard currency, then they can take it out. Then also, I think what's important as well is the government has earmarked Victoria Falls as an offshore financial service center, and they are currently working on the legislation. And the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange has been used as the front in terms of its establishment. What are the key features of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange? The first one, as I said, is the capital raising. You can raise capital in USD or any hard currency. So the law gives us dispensation to raise in any hard currency. But at the moment, the emphasis is on USD, but it can be any other currency. Then also the trading, the clearing and settlement is also in USD. So if you buy shares, the secondary market is in United States dollars. It's got its own depository, which was important. A depository is where a register of your shares are kept in simple terms, and VFEX has got its own. And we also managed to get quite a lot of dispensations from the Ministry of Finance. One of them was that when you sell your shares on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, there is no capital gains tax. That is currently 1% on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, which we believe is a big deal. Then the other one is in terms of tax on dividends, especially for foreign investors. So if your company is unlisted and a foreign investor has to take dividends out or dividends are declared, the withholding tax for an unlisted company is 15%. And if a company is listed on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, it's 10%. And as you can see, the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is even better, it's 5%. Then in terms of the other thing as well is when you buy and sell shares on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, your transaction costs are much lower, almost 2% lower on a round trip. So overall, it's more attractive to buy and sell shares on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, which is important because companies like yourself can raise the currency that you like, that you need, this capital in the currency that you require. You are able to attract investors better because there's less currency risk and it's competitive. When you appeal to foreign investors, you're actually appealing on a competitive package compared to other exchanges in the region. So in terms of funds movement on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, so we have, there was a directive issued by the Reserve Bank which states out what I'm talking about now in terms of how money moves in and out on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So what you need to do is that there's what is called, there's an offshore FCI, investment FCI account that will need to be opened. And all the money that comes from IPO private placement has to be from free funds or from offshore funds, and we have to put into that account. So if you want to have the money offshore, you have to apply to have an offshore account, and once you have an offshore account, then you can move that money outside, and you can then buy and sell you can buy whatever equipment you want with the money already offshore. And when you want to, and that money can be used to meet foreign requirements without seeking prior exchange approval. So that is important. And the other thing that is important as well is that if you're an investor on the on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, the proceeds that come out have no restrictions, surrender requirements, and can be held for indefinite period. Same as well for the money that you have raised on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange as a company. It's not subject to any restrictions, surrender requirements, and you can hold it for indefinite period. And the other thing that was also important for foreign investors as well is that any disinvestment dividend processes due to non-residents are freely remittable without exchange control. So if you declare a dividend to a foreign investor, as soon as the money hit their account, they can take it out of the country. They don't need any exchange control approval. Same if they sell their shares. Then they want to leave the country, then they want to proceed to leave the country, they can do that without further exchange control approval. So why do we think you should list on the Victoria Falls Exchange? I think just to emphasize what we said before, there is much more flexible exchange control approval. Definitely there's incentives for shareholders, things like lower withholding tax, no capital gains tax. And the hard currency is important in terms of trading and settlement, and also in terms of ourselves, in terms of the listing fees. So if you compare the listing fees on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange and on ZSC, the listing fees on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange are lower and are competitive as well in the region. And you don't have to, you can do quite a lot in terms of what you can list on the Victoria Falls Exchange. You can list equity, you can list debt, you can do exchange traded funds, you can do real investment trusts, you can do depository receipts. So you can do quite a lot in terms of that. And one of the big advantages of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is if you are companies in terms of the valuation. So at the moment, if you're a Zimbabwean company and you want to value yourself in US dollars, it's much more difficult because of different currencies. But if you are trading on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, the valuation is easier, and that helps very much in terms of attracting foreign investors. Then why are we talking to you? Because we believe that mining companies, so when we're thinking about the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, mining was definitely one of the key target sectors that we had in mind. Why mining companies? Because you are largely an export-oriented businesses with significant foreign currency earnings, and that's important because if you are an investor on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, you want your return to be in hard currency. You want a dividend in hard currency. So if you are mining, you'll be able to meet that requirement. Then also we know that you require capital, not just when you are starting the mine, but all the time when you are expanding the mine. So and the capital that you require is the equipment that is needed. Most of it is imported, so you need hard currency. So this will be the best forum for you to raise hard currency. And shareholders understand this as well. And we also believe that mining companies are used to high standards especially in terms of safety, and that they'll be willing to meet the international standards that we need for this exchange to work. So that's why we're targeting the mining sector, what we're looking for. And what you can raise is not just equity, you also can raise debt as well. So you got a combination of what you want to do. Okay. So the other thing as well that we are looking at is we know, as they will say, as my colleagues will talk about, is that there is a minimum amount in terms of capital for you to come onto the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. And we've looked at other exchanges, especially the Toronto Stock Exchange, and we are looking at a different board for small scale miners. And we are thinking either we are weighing between a venture board and a junior mining board, and this will have lower capital requirements, so you can raise lower amounts than what we have now on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. It will be less stringent rules, and also it also take into consideration as well that this will be mainly owner-managed companies, so that's important. And also it will allow easier for exploration companies. It's a bit more difficult on the VFEX, but we believe that this will work much better on the venture board or on the junior mining board. And at the moment, there are three things that we are looking at. We are trying to lobby to see if we can get tax incentives for investors, because if investors are going to invest in small-scale miners, the risk is higher. So tax incentives help quite a lot. Then also we want to see how we can work closer with the Ministry of Mines, especially in terms of mining rights and making sure that we're working with the right people. And also we're also looking at the skills mix in our organization. We need more people that understand the mining sector, also within the organization itself, so that when you bring your proposal, they know more what they're talking about. So this is something that we are looking at working on at the moment, having something that can target small-scale miners. Then in terms of risks, we know that this is a new exchange, so there are risks that are there, and this is what we are doing in terms of what we're trying to mitigate them. So the first thing that you have on a new exchange is you always have a risk of liquidity. There's a saying that we say on the exchange, which says liquidity begets liquidity. When you have liquidity, you get more liquidity. So it's very important that we try to improve the liquidity. So there are various things that we're trying to do. The first one is to increase the depth of the products. So we want to make sure that as many companies as possible are listed on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, and not just equities offered on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. There's ETFs in terms of international, an international ETF that targets companies listed elsewhere, commodity exchange. So the more products that you have on an exchange, the more exciting it is for people, and the more they will come on that exchange. Then the second one is in terms of a market maker. So have someone who is dedicated to make sure that there's liquidity on your stock, both sides, in terms of offering shares as well as offering to buy those who want to sell. Then also COVID did slow us down a little bit, but one of the things that we want to do is to market the exchange as well as market the companies that want to list or are listed on the exchange. So we're thinking of doing a roadshow where ourselves, those companies, as well as the government as well, go around the world selling this exchange as well as the companies. Then we also know the settlement risks as well. So one of the things that people are always skeptical about Zimbabwe is that they will say, how do I make sure that I get my money out? So one of the things that we are working on, which we are in the process of doing at the moment, is to do a guarantee fund. So a guarantee fund just guarantees people that if they trade their shares on ZSE, on VFEX, they can get their money out. So the guarantee fund is gonna be important. Then also in the long term as well is we're working with people to have the clearing and settlement offshore. So at the moment we're doing it onshore with the Reserve Bank, but definitely we're actively working to make sure that we can have this done offshore. Then we're very keen to make sure that there's participation by local investors. It's very difficult to attract foreign investors if the local investors are not involved as well. We understand that. We know that foreign investors phone local investors to find out first what they think about something before they come in. So we are working with the banks to make sure that there's lower bank charges for local investors, because that's one of the big problems in terms of moving money. So the bank charges can be high. Then also the same way that we did with ZSC, we're working on a platform where it makes it easier for retail investors also to be able to participate on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. People always ask us why we believe VFEX will work, why we are bullish on it. I think there are three main reasons why we are bullish. So the first one is that we know we have strong government support on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. It is part of a wider strategy by the Minister of Finance to establish an offshore financial service center, and they are working actively on this. And Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is going to be part of this, and a core part of that. So for government, they really want this to work. So that's one of the reasons. Then the second reason why we are bullish on the VFEX as well is that at the moment, under the Statutory Instrument 268 of 2020, insurance companies now can receive premiums and pay claims in US dollars. So we know that these premiums will need an investment home. So what's important for us is to provide this home on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. And also, as we did after dollarization, there was a lot of movement in Zimbabwe, both in terms of companies raising money and foreign investors coming in. So we know that the stability of the US dollar, investors, especially foreign investors, also as local ones, who prefer USD denominated assets. So we believe that if we make this, when it's working, it will be attractive both to companies who want to raise money and to investors as well. That's the reason why we are bullish on VFEX. That's the end for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin, for this introductory remarks. I don't know from the colleagues in the meeting if there are any questions for Justin before we almost press to pass. You can raise your hand if you have a question or a query before we move to the next presenter. Oh, okay, I see a couple of hands up. Perhaps let me start with Kudzi. Sharara, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Edmo. I just wanted to find out from Mr. Boni in terms of how many potential listings are we talking to at the moment?
Okay. So I won't give numbers, but all I can say is we are talking to quite a few potential companies now. So the thing is, as you would understand, they will have to go through their due process. So I don't want to preempt, but definitely we are talking to people who are looking at listing. We are definitely talking to, there are three types of people that we are talking to. So we are talking to people who are looking to raise equity. We're talking to quite a few people who are looking to raise debt on the market. And we're talking to people who want to bring commodity or international ETFs onto the market.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kudzi. There was another hand. I'm not sure if I see it's down now. Whether there is another question. Okay. If not, perhaps we can proceed. You can also use the chat box to type in your question as the presentations are being rolled out. And we'll have another question and answer session after Dr. Kwesu's presentation. So allow me now to call upon Dr. Kwesu to share with us his remarks from Dr. Kwesu is the CEO for the Chamber of Mines. I think the biggest representation of the big mining houses we have in this country. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Enimo. Can I observe all protocols so that without wasting much time, I go direct into my presentations. Once again, I would like to thank the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange for giving us an opportunity to share with you our views vis-a-vis what we perceive as the importance of this stock exchange to capital raising efforts that are currently being pursued by our mining houses. My remark, and specifically to the introduction of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, comes at no other critical time that our mining industry is facing a myriad of challenges, some which are unique to our sector, others, just like other sectors, they are systemic and exogenous to the economy. Our members and mining houses have been trying their best to navigate the current turbulent business condition in the hope to either sustain their operations or to grow their business, specifically in the medium term. My presentation or my remark just
We have lost you there, Dr. Kwasu. I'm not sure, colleagues, if it's my network or it's, if Mr. Kwesi is also audible to your side.
No, we can't hear him.
We've lost him.
Okay, all right. Let me try to contact him on his mobile. Okay, I think he's saying his Wi-Fi is playing up, so he's trying to connect through the phone. So I think let's give him just a minute.
I think I'm back anymore.
Okay.
Anymore, I think I'm back.
All right, you can continue.
Thank you. So I was saying, I'm going to point out to the importance of our mining industry to the economy, specifically why we need this Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. And two, I'm going to outline the current capital challenges that are undermining the potential growth and the developmental role of our mining industry. And also, thirdly, just to indicate how we view Victoria Falls Stock Exchange as a solution to the capital raising challenges we are facing, and for the twin role between the VFEX and Chamber of Mines to ensure that all broader challenges that affect the growth of the industry are sorted out. Just on the role and contribution of our mining industry, the best way to understand the role of our mining industry, that every Zimbabwean, no matter how literate they are, is to just think what happens if there's no mining industry in Zimbabwe today, or just we wake up and you hear government has banned mining or the export of specific minerals. Otherwise, you understand what will happen and the multiplier impact to the whole economy that are linked to the mining industry. Our mining industry, in terms of resource endowment, we are one of the highly diversified in the world, with close to more than 40 different minerals. The sector currently accounts for more than 12% of the gross domestic product, and we have potential to generate as much as 12 billion annually, and the target by government is by 2023. Just to indicate to you that the 12% share of the GDP is direct, but mining has also strong linkages, and its multiplier is between 3 to 4. In other words, we are saying per every dollar that is generated by the mining industry, 4 other dollars are created in other sectors of the economy. Or for every employee that mining directly employs, 4 other employees are employed elsewhere in the spin-off or linked industries with the sector. The sector contributes more than 50% of the country's export earnings. Hence, it's very important to the foreign exchange markets. In terms of labor, our sector is human capital intensive, and we employ a significant number of people, more than 45,000 formal, and as much as 500,000 to 1 million if we include informal sector. The mining sector is also a significant consumer of raw materials produced by other sectors. I'm talking about strong linkages of our industry with other sectors. And this brings about the multiplier that I've been talking about, either in the upstream, those who provide service to the industry, those in the mainstream, as well as those on the downstream. So these are some of the important contribution or role that our mining industry plays to the social economic development of our country. In terms of challenges, our mining industry has been facing a lot of challenges, and these are well documented. Some of these challenges include: 1, we have limited investment in the industry. The capital shortages we are currently facing are both undermining the sustenance of our operations as well as developmental projects or investment into new projects. We are also currently having challenges relating to foreign exchange retention, which is reduced the foreign currency available for miners to import critical equipment as well as other important consumables. The sector is relatively, high cost structure in terms of utilities. We also have the infrastructure also relating to electricity, as well as transport also being either insufficient or high cost. We have cumbersome tax structures that are suboptimal when you compare to other mining jurisdictions. High compliance costs in terms of regulation and policy. Also the issues surrounding the mineral price volatility. This commodity price volatility remains a challenge facing most of our miners, and it has been a big issue, specifically in the base metals. How can the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange assist our miners in the effort to raise capital? Capital is one of the major important factor for mining to exist. The mining industry is highly capital intensive and has long-term gestation period, effectively implying that the sector in terms of its projects are highly risk, as well as that we require long-term capital. If you do an introspection to the current financial markets in Zim, you will see that most of the available capital are currently short-term or they are transaction in nature, which does not align to the nature of our projects. So we really need this capital. As you know, Zimbabwe, just like other mining jurisdiction, we have to compete with this. We have to compete for this capital, which is high mobile and high risk, as I've said. The introduction of Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will assist our members in a long way. One that by definition and by its nature, the VFEX is a platform that will ensure our mining houses will be able to raise the long-term capital, either in equity or in debt. They'll be able to raise this amount of money. And as I've said, it's a high risk by raising money through capital markets. The markets will ensure that the risk is either distributed, it's either pooled, and it will make sure that it will be minimized. And some of these projects, in terms of their risk return, risk-adjusted return, they will become also amenable. It will also provide opportunities for the investors, spin-offs, and other corporate restructures, which is also very critical for the sector, as well as ability to access venture capital and exploration finance. Exploration is a precursor to mining. We need to grow our resource base if we have to sustain mining operations, if we have to sustain financial markets that rely on mining output or income. We also have to make sure that exploration is financed. This is also a high risk area when it comes to funding. You cannot use regular income, or you cannot use tax income if it's government projects. This requires risk capital, and the stock exchange can play this critical role. We also know that the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, if it's going to be structured in a way, it can also ensure that there may be also some commodity trading, as the CEO of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange has just alluded. So this is also very important, as we will be able to ensure that the mining industry is able to participate direct as commodity or in terms of finances. Wherever the industry has excess funds, I think we can also invest this on the Victoria Stock Exchange as a platform. It will enhance us to be able to do that. And lastly, I just want to outline how the chamber can work with the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange to ensure mutual benefits to both the exchange and the mining industry. Just to tell you that our view is that the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is a very necessary condition for the mining industry to achieve its objectives. But for it to be sufficient, as I've said, the challenges relating to mining are not merely capital raising. They are not merely relating to cost of capital, but it may be broader than that. And for mining to sustain the listing that it could have been done on stock exchange, we need to address all challenges that affect the development and growth of the industry. And together, we may be able to address some of these things by engaging government. I'm very happy the CE's presentation was outlining a number of tax concession or incentives that can make us participate on the stock exchange. But we from the mining industry as a chamber, our role is to ensure we promote the growth and development and ensure that all inhibiting factors are removed, because investors, yes, they need capital, but capital is not needed for its sake, but for ultimate goal to generate profit. As long as profit is not guaranteed, no matter how free and how good the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is, we may still see miners not able to participate. So we have to address these broader challenges facing the industry to make sure that the operating environment is enabling, it's amenable to growth, amenable to profitability, and together the Vic Falls Stock Exchange and the Chamber of Mines will be able to ensure that we're able to sustain the stock exchange as well as guaranteeing the growth that the investor will be looking for in order to participate. The issues surrounding information, as you know, information asymmetry also hinders investment and capital raising. We, as Chamber, together with the VFEX, we could hold joint roadshows to potential investors, educate them, try to clear as much information gaps as they require to make sure that this stock exchange is become more free or perfectly competitive market with all information that investors may look for. Lastly, also the VFX and Chamber who could also collaborate in lobbying for policies, as I have said, that promote positive economic growth and create an everlasting conducive investment climate for Zimbabwe. So, as I've said, we need to align the mining objectives with the stock exchange objectives, and together we'll be able to grow our mining industry for the good of our nation. With those remarks, once again, I would like to thank you for the opportunity that we've given the Chamber to share our views with you. Thank you, Director of Ceremony.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kweso. I think that was clearly outlined. Thank you so much for those sentiments and for that commitment, I think, to work together to also ensure that not only the mining sector, but the overall economy also benefits from the downstream activities, even the upstream activities that are linked to the mining sector. From the floor, I don't know if there are any questions for Dr. Kweso before we move to the next presentation. If you've got a question, you can text it in the chat box, or you could just raise your hand and unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so probably the colleagues are still synthesizing that information. Let me now give this opportunity to Mr. Sean Gammon from Imara Capital to share with us the perspectives from a financial advisor, how financial advisors can work with corporates, institutions in the mining sector that may want to know more about listing. How do they engage? What is the role of the financial advisor? Mr. Gammon, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. I assume that you can hear me. Let me just pull my presentation up.
Yes, I can hear you, Sean.
Okay. Is my presentation on the screen?
No, not yet, not yet. So click that upward facing arrow, which says open share tray, and it should guide you to be able to share your screen.
Here we go.
Yeah, it's now showing.
Okay, great. Thanks. I think that my specific mandate here was to talk about the role of the financial advisor. I think the assumption is that in terms of what Justin's gone through, the concept of listing and the benefits thereof are established and communicated. And so I'm just going to go through really in terms of the role of the financial advisor. But just for those that are not aware of who Imara is, in Zimbabwe, we're a non-banking financial institution. We've got businesses in asset management, corporate finance, which is where I sit and which is where the financial advisor comes from, fiduciary services, which can handle collateral and things like that, and stockbroking business, which is our traditional business. It's really our DNA. So we've been very involved with the development of capital markets in Zimbabwe, initially, obviously, with the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, and we're obviously very happy to see the Vic Falls market come about and go from strength to strength. So we're very happy to be involved. I think in terms of the role of the financial advisor at a listing or a flotation, it really falls into four broad categories, which I've put here as preparing you guys, yourselves, your company, preparing the market to have you and market-related issues, regulatory infrastructural management, which is primarily Justin and his many cohorts, and then process issues, which is really getting the thing done. So I think we can walk through a few of those. In terms of preparing your company, when we take on a client that wants to go towards a listing and towards a flotation on the stock exchange, we usually sit down and have a look at the business, and it's usually a process of anywhere between 6 months and 18 months to get a company to a point of listing. And a lot of that is sitting with the company and understanding what the business is and understanding what the structures are and making sure that they are well prepared for the time when they do take the step out into the publicly listed zone. Essentially, there's a number of elements there. Some of them are financial, some of them are legal types of elements. But a lot of it is coming alongside the management and the board of the company and working through getting them prepared to the point where we're ready to list. I think, obviously, in terms of the financial elements, there's sort of review of capital, cash flow, debt positions, that type of thing. That talks a lot to the story that you're going into the market with. It talks a lot to the reason to raise capital at the time of listing. Are you raising capital for expansion purposes? Are you raising capital to pay down debts? Are you raising capital to pay out shareholders? There's three very broad areas, but those types of things need to be balanced out so that it is ideal from a listings point of view. Reviewing the business plan and financial statements and projections. I think this is vital. We spend a lot of time with clients where we go through this in terms of the forward thinking. And it leads on to my third point here, which is coming up with a valuation that we can discuss with the business. I think, our belief is that when we financially model your business, it gives us the best understanding for what are the impacts and what are the elements that play on your business. So we can best understand what your revenue drivers are. We can best understand what impacts on margin. We can best understand where the costs are and what those impacts are. And in doing that, it puts us in a position where we understand your business. So when we go out into the market later on,
sorry.
Yeah.
Your presentation is not moving. Perhaps if you can scroll to the slide which you are talking on.
I have got it on my screen.
Oh, okay. I'm just seeing the first page. Perhaps it's my side.
Sorry, does everybody else have this problem more?
Sure, Tapio, if you can confirm.
We can see the first slide just like you, Enmo.
Okay, so it's just showing the first slide, I think, to the rest of the team as well. Yeah, it has moved now. Okay.
Which one? If I do this, is this moving on your screen?
Yeah, it's moving now.
Okay. Okay, sorry. All right, we're here on preparing your company. Is this a screen that's showing now? So one says preparing your company on the top.
Yeah, it's showing.
All right, getting used to this new technology. Okay, so what I'm saying basically is that by being able to fully understand your business, by picking apart how it works from a financial point of view, we can understand where the core drivers of value are for investors, and we can understand how the business works in the event that we we are interacting with investors on your behalf. I think it's also fundamental that for you as a company, as a board of directors and as management, to deal with somebody in the financial sector that says, forget about how you've done things and how you've looked at your business. We know what the market does and what they look for, and when they do it, they're going to want to model your business. They're going to want to ask you questions about the drivers of revenue. They're going to want to ask you questions about what impacts on margin. And so let's build this out so that we all understand what we're talking about. And then finally, when we do valuation process, we can talk on a real basis for what we believe to be a value to bring to bringing this company to the market. And our biggest thing is that we do see delusions of grandeur in terms of project promoters thinking that the thing is worth 100, whereas we think that the market will say that it's worth 20, and we need to move that process. And part of that is doing fundamental valuation. It's also important to review management and governance structures. Particularly governance now has become a very big thing, obviously, and is incorporated in both the listing rules and the New Companies Act. So we need to ensure that companies have the right sort of structures that the market will be comfortable with in terms of the right sort of levels of corporate governance, non-executives, that there's an adequate spread of experience and knowledge there, that the financial team within the company that's going to list is strong enough to handle the kind of questioning that's going to come from institutional investors. And there's a process sometimes during that of saying, well, look, we think that you need to do this, you need to strengthen your audit committee, or you need to make these changes. And it's a good thing to do those changes many months before you actually come to the market so that the people are bedded in. In terms of other reviews that we do with the company, reviewing the memo and articles, obviously they need to be ZSC and VFEX compliant. It's a relatively short thing in many cases. Most of them are, but some of them aren't, so we basically need to do that. Review capital structures is important because, as I said, we may be issuing new shares to investors, so we need to make sure that we've got sufficient unauthorized capital under our control to issue in the event of doing an IPO and that sort of thing. And it's better to have done that and had it in place well ahead of the time of coming to the market. And finally, really talking about employees and how employees benefit and employees and management in terms of the listing process and whether there are any structures going in. So that's the preparing the company elements that we tend to make a start with, as I say, anywhere up to 18 months before we're actually hitting the market, depending on the company. So what I think is, even though the VFX market is relatively new, relatively thin, anything like that, if you're seriously committed to the point of going to list, you need to start having the discussion with your financial advisors and your bankers and your lawyers now, so that you have the time to prepare. I think the second broad element, did my slide move?
Yes, Sean, it has moved.
Okay. All right, we're an expert now. Okay, the second broad element is preparing the market. And by this, I'm really talking about the financial advisor bridging the gap between the company and the market in terms of educating both of those elements on this potential new investment. So exposing the company to institutional investors and what that broad animal looks like, and exposing the institutional investors to the potential listing that's coming. Part of this is benchmarking the company. So sitting with the company and explaining how we see the value stacking up in terms of the listed sphere, both in terms of comparative companies, but also in terms of where it fits in generally. So, how does your company fit in terms of ZSE? You've got a feeling for what a company like Delta InScore is like, or what a company like Axia is like in terms of size and scope. that's roughly where we think that your company is going to fit in terms of valuation, but also where it fits in terms of a regional model, because the types of investors that you're looking to attract are not, and actually particularly in the beginning part with the VFX market, you'll be looking to attract foreign investors. What are the options that they have in your sphere elsewhere that they would be looking at? There's no point listing if you're at a great big premium to something that's listed similar business in Zambia or Johannesburg. And internationally, how does it look compared to where you're looking in terms of ASX and Toronto and places like that? I think also just managing initial exposure to local and sub-Saharan institutions, gauging market interest. So there's a process of building it out to say we look at bringing this company to the market. Perhaps things like mine visits and things like that can be quite useful ahead of time. Identification, negotiation of an underwriter leading into an IPO process is a very big thing. This is effectively a financial institution or a market player that may well take a significant stake in the business, and so they need to fully understand the business, and it needs to be a good working relationship. And finally, sort of going through to Pathfinder documents, pre-IPO roadshows, as I say, taking them out to visit mining sites, having people have an understanding about the fundamentals of the business before we get to prospectus type of period. The fourth element is the regulatory infrastructure management. I'm going to call it that. Essentially, broadly speaking, this is your role of appropriate regulators. Obviously, the biggest one and the one that you're most involved with through this process is the relevant stock exchange authority. That process and that interaction is handled via the sponsoring broker, but essentially driven by the financial advisor. This would essentially take the stage early on of meeting with the exchange and discussing the client, discussing the opportunity to bring the listing, discussing elements around what the structure of the listing will be. Will it be an IPO? Will it be a secondary listing? Because obviously a lot of mining businesses already have listings, and so it would be a process of bringing along possibly a secondary listing. What would it look like in terms of capital raise? What sort of elements are there in terms of share option schemes and this sort of participation schemes? And really essentially initially bringing on the exchange in terms of the fact that there is this process. Further on, obviously what goes on is approval by the stock exchange regulators of all documentation and of the process itself as we go forward. So there's an ongoing relationship that is driven by the financial advisor and the sponsoring broker, ongoing relationship with the stock exchange authorities. And then various other ones as and when they become applicable in Zimbabwe. And I think even with regard to the Victoria Falls exchange, there's going to be elements of exchange control intervention and discussion. The listing may well reside in Victoria Falls, but the mine itself doesn't. And there's going to be a lot of other elements of interaction with exchange control to make sure that everything is in place. ZIMRA, which is our tax authorities, if appropriate, it may well be that there's elements of corporate reconstruction that take place ahead of a listing, and it may well be that the corporate would be going to ZIMRA to seek concessions and things like that with regard to CGT and elements like that. Investment authorities obviously is not necessarily an element of the listing process, as is the case with line ministries, but they are in terms of you running your business as a miner. So those elements may well require some oversight and intervention on the part of the financial advisor, although it's almost always together with other advisors So then the process itself, and really this is the paperwork and the actual process of going through what this thing is, possibly the IPO. So all transaction documentation, the biggest and most obvious one of which is the prospectus, pre-listing statements, and any applications into the various stock exchange authorities and the like. That may well also include input into redrafting the non-arts and so they limit in terms of really just the paperwork process that goes in there. The investor briefing presentations, which are put together by the financial advisor together with the company, so that we can go out into the market and roadshow effectively. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, your audio is breaking a bit. I'm not sure. Perhaps you can just check your connection, but it's breaking a bit.
Yeah, it's my speakers. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so I think then the process issues, underwriting agreements, other legal undertakings. Can you hear me?
Yeah, your audio was clear.
Yeah, okay, are elements that need to work by the financial advisor, often in conjunction with the legal advisor. Overseeing inputs into other advisors is a large part of the process, and really the process of the IPO, which is to say the communication elements, making sure it's open, making sure the transfer secretaries are in place, share allocations are done at the end of the process, and refunds and things like that are processed through to investors. So that's the fourth broad element. I say those four broad elements, but actually the most important role is something you can't see. And that is that the financial advisor, it's his responsibility to manage the whole process. It's the role of the advisor to eat, sleep, and breathe the transaction. And really it's a flotation process is extremely taxing on management time and board time. And the process is best if it is handled by somebody who wakes up in the morning and thinks about it immediately, leaving the management of the business to be able to continue to manage their business and not lose the ball there. So I think with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you so much. I think that was well articulated. I don't know if there are any questions from the floor. Please feel free to unmute and ask your question. Okay, I don't see any questions. Probably it was clear enough. So Sean, thank you so much. You can stop presenting now, and we will move on to, and please stay on the line as well. We would want to, Mr. Kwesu, I think Dr. Kwesu, if you're still around, please also stick around. My marketing team will want a screenshot at the end of this presentation. So please stay around. We'll move on to a presentation and our final presentation from Ms. Shoniwa of Southern Trust. She's a stockbroker with Southern Trust Securities, and she will present to us on the role of a sponsor. So we've heard the presentation from the financial advisor. They normally work hand in hand with the sponsor. Previously, we called them sponsoring brokers, but that role is now open to non-broking entities, so we're just calling them sponsors. And she will take us through what to be expected, etc., etc. So Ms. Shoniwa, if you are there, please go ahead and share your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tarwinga. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, yes, indeed. You are very clear.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. All protocols observed. I'll just run through the sponsoring broker's presentation. Some of the things have already been said, but I will just go through them all the same. The presentation outline is why list on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, the value of being a listed entity on VFEX, the process of listing, the role of a sponsoring broker, and continuing obligations. So we'll start with why list on VFEX. The first one is a response to the need of hard currency capital. The VFEX, as Mr. Boni has also explained, it just came by as a response to the need of the hard currency capital by real sectors of the economy. And the need to reduce exchange control risk. We know the difficulties that foreign investors faced in repatriating foreign capital in the past, but with VFEX, that will be a thing of the past. And also to kickstart the establishment of Offshore Financial Services Center. As it was stated again, Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is in a special economic zone, which will operate under different economic laws. It also has lower transaction costs, that has been said, in buying and selling of shares. And the highlight is the zero capital gains tax and 5% withholding tax on dividends. And you have your tax haven right there. Then the key incentives awarded to VFEX through statutory instrument 196 of 2020. I'll go through those. Those are the special provisions for securities listed on VFEX. The key incentives awarded through the statutory instrument, which mining companies can also benefit from, include the following. Listed securities are solely traded in US dollars or any other convertible currency. The capital raised by a company listed on VFEX may be held in an approved local or offshore account with an internationally recognized banking institution. There's an allowance to use offshore settlements for trades done. And then funds held in the FCA investments shall not be subject to any surrender requirements and shall be held for an indefinite period for use by the listed company. And lastly, the investment inflows received by a resident company listed on VFEX in its investment FCA can be held for an indefinite period for use by the listed company without seeking prior exchange control approval. Then we go to the value of listing. Shareholder value. The Victoria Falls Stock Exchange presents opportunities for investors to diversify their risk and returns. And ability to raise capital in hard currency. And then there is also an employee value that it's through things like employment schemes that can be awarded to employees, which entails a sense of belonging for those employees. So we'll also be able to raise capital in hard currency, I've said that, and the ability to use different securities to raise capital, debt, equity, ETFs, the exchange traded funds, and rates, real estate investment trusts. All those are under that. And then enhanced profile within and outside Zimbabwe. And the process of listing is outlined there. First, you discuss with the exchange. Then there's an appointment of a professional advisor. Then preparation of listing documents. Then we go to the application to list and the payment of fee. Then review of the application by the exchange, conditional listing approval. And then when the conditions are met, the entity is listed. Then there's a listing ceremony and we start the trade. the timetable is like a duration of 33 days from day 0. So I'll just go through it as well. Day 0 is the publication and announcement of pre-listing statement. Pre-listing statement made available. The offer opens. All required documents must have been submitted and approved to the VFEX. That will happen, and then on day 21, the offer closes. By day 24, the results of the offer are submitted to the exchange, and then the results are announced on day 27, published by the applicant, giving date of commencement of dealing in securities if listing has been granted, or appropriate negative statements that would have been issued. Then day 33, the securities are listed, and that's the last date for refunds. So the sponsoring broker, as Mr. Gamon was explaining, the sponsoring brokers work closely with the legal advisors and the financial advisors. So who is a sponsor? That's the first question. In times past, this function used to be handled by registered brokers, but now it's open to more professionals like the security dealers themselves, which are the registered brokers, and then banks, accountants, legal practitioners, and investment advisors. Then other professionals as may be approved by the exchange. Like I said, we work closely with the financial advisors and the legal advisors. And all issuers on the exchange require a sponsor. The role of the sponsor. Sponsorship roles are covered by section 16, 18, and 20 of Statutory Instrument 134 of 2019 that outlines listing requirement rules and are read with the 16th schedule. Sponsors are primarily responsible for the following on the exchange. Number 1, to facilitate communication between the issuer and the exchange. So we act as mediators between the exchange and the issuer. And then to assist in step-by-step approach on any transaction on the exchange. To ensure that adequate documents required for any transactions are complete and accurate. That is our job. To help ensure that they comply with the continuing obligations while listed on the exchange. To ensure that advisors appointed by the issuer have the relevant credentials. To provide timely information to the exchange regarding circumstances of issuers. So the appointment of a sponsor, this is under continuing obligations. So an issuer must appoint a sponsor, and all correspondence with the VFEX must be directed through the sponsor. I mentioned that previous time that we're like a mediator that goes between the exchange and the sponsor. Then disclosure requirements. General obligations to disclose all material price-sensitive information. That is so crucial. We just have to make sure that no one gets privileged information before others, because that can be damaging. So we make sure that everyone gets the information at the same time. So disclosure is very crucial. And then obligation to disclose periodic financial information, like your half years and your year-end financial information, to maintain minimum shareholder spread, like the minimum percentage held by the public, to ensure that all necessary facilities and information are available to enable holders of securities to exercise their rights. Then to issue issuers whose securities are listed on another exchange must ensure that equivalent information is made available at the same time to the market of every exchange its securities are listed, unless if that is prohibited by the rules or requirements of any such securities exchange. But otherwise,
sorry, Madam Shonio,
yes.
I'm not sure if you're speaking from your presentation or because it's still showing the continuing obligations.
Yes, that's where I'm on. On disclosure requirements. It's under disclosure requirements. Thank you. All the ones that I mentioned right now are under disclosure requirements.
Okay.
So you want me to read it again or?
No, please continue.
I continue. Okay. So yes, I'm done with the disclosure requirements. Now the annual listing charge. We have to make sure that the annual charge for listing is paid. And that is all. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Shoniwa, for that brief on the role of the sponsoring broker. There was a question in the chat box just when you came in from Aubrey, who said that considering the cost associated with IPOs, can there be a possibility of direct listing? I'm assuming she's saying, can we just come to the exchange on our own, perhaps without using any advisor, any sponsoring broker, if I got you correctly, Aubrey? And my response would be, the cost of listing actually expected to be recouped from the proceeds that you actually raise as part of the capital raising. So let's assume you want to raise $2 million for your requirements. You then employ or engage service providers who charge you, let's say, $100,000. You actually then, as part of the capital raising, actually raise 2.1 million instead of the 2 million, and the 100,000 is clearly disclosed in the circulars that you publish, that the 100,000 will cater for the costs of listing. So that's perfectly permissible. So if you're worried about the cost of the service providers, those costs are recouped or they are obtained as part of the capital raising. So you bump up your requirements to cater for the costs of the flotation. Direct listing may also be a challenge in the case that you need independent people to also assess what you are proposing to do and probably give you guidance, because the success of the capital raising usually depends on the quality of the service providers that you also engage. So to ensure that you actually successfully raise capital, you also need to make sure that you work with the quality service providers. If I got that question correctly. I also see that there's a question from Dorothy. What does prevent that is trading? Perhaps Ms. Shoniwa, there's a question directed towards you. What doing insider trading on the exchange? Perhaps you can respond to that.
Okay, the exchange has there's clauses to prevent that. Like when a company is about to produce results, there's a time that is called the close period, where they cannot trade their shares, or the relatives or some people who are close to them. So those people that have that information cannot do anything in the stock market. And that is how we prevent it. And even this thing of sharing information at the same time to all the shareholders, any sensitive information must be published as soon as you know about it, so that everyone gets exercises caution when they are trading on the shares.
Okay, thank you, Madam Shoniwa. So Dorothy, I think just to add, there are safety mechanisms in the listings requirements that try to ensure that the corporate will disclose as much information as possible to try and make sure that every person is holding the same information at the same time, and also that where there are chances that insiders may be having beneficial information, they actually don't go on to profit from that information. So Madam Shoniwa commented about the issue of the closed periods. There are certain time frames where insiders are not allowed to trade, and the sponsors actually advise you of such closed periods. There's also a question from David. Are the listing requirements the same for large and small scale operators? I'm not sure if Justin if he's still available on the meeting, but Justin did talk about the fact that we also are trying to work with small scale miners. So currently the rules that we have don't separate large from small, but we are in the process of crafting rules for the junior mining board, which will separate the big scale or the large scale players from the small scale players. I don't know, Justin, if you want to add to that question.
Okay, all right. So, so it's something that we are working on. That we will be publishing the rules for comment very shortly. But it's something that is very common elsewhere. I think the biggest exchange that is done this way is the Toronto Stock Exchange. So we'll be publishing the rules shortly for people to comment.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps I'll also add that the VFEX rules currently are very flexible, even though the written ones specify certain requirements. We have been given a dispensation from the regulators to be flexible in implementing them for the next 12 to 18 months. So even if you feel that perhaps your size does not meet the thresholds that are in the written rules, I think feel free to approach a sponsor or to approach us directly. There's flexibility that we've been allowed in terms of implementing the current requirements. I think those were the comments that came through from the chat box. I don't know if there are any other questions from the colleagues in the auditorium or on the floor. Feel free to ask if. Okay, I think David is asked again, another one. Which stock exchanges are you benchmarking with? So we are setting, and Justin will add, we are setting VFEX to compete with international exchanges. Like we indicated, it's part of a bigger project which government is actually working on to establish an international offshore financial services center in the Victoria Falls. So there are exchanges or their international financial service centers in Dubai, in Hong Kong, and other areas like Kazakhstan. Those are sort of the jurisdictions that we're actually benchmarking ourselves with in terms of scope. I don't know if Justin, if you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, you summarized it well. Yeah, so we are looking at other countries, what they've done and what the best model could be in Zimbabwe. And we are working very closely with the Minister of Finance on this.
Okay, thank you. Right, I don't see any other question. Perhaps going last round of calling on questions. If there are any, please feel free to unmute and ask if you've got any question. Okay, so there's another one in the chat box as well. Can one raise capital on the VFX for applications and projects in other countries? Definitely. So on the VFX, both foreign and local companies can list. So even those that have got operations outside the country can actually list. Those with local operations can also list. So you can actually list and fund projects that are outside outside the country. That's quite permissible. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So probably let me thank you all the speakers and presenters today. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Dr. Kwesu. I think has since left. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Ms. Shoniwa, for sharing with us your time and those presentations. I think they'll go a long way in trying assisting potential issuers from the mining sector in terms of how they can go about approaching the capital markets. What I will request now is for those that shared presentation, so Sean, to just turn on your videos. Our marketing team would want to take a snapshot of the presenter. So if you could turn on your video so that we could see your face. Not sure if Sean, you're still around. Please turn on your video so that we can take some snapshots. Okay, thank you. All right, so Tapua, you can go ahead and take the screenshot. Just confirm if you are done, and then they can be able to turn their videos off.
Thank you, Enmo. They can turn
right.
on off their videos.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen who attended. Okay, there's a question that has come through, a couple of questions, perhaps before we go. Will the slides and presentations be circulated? So I'm sure definitely Tapua will arrange for those that registered. If you haven't registered, please send your email to info, or probably Tapua will. Tapua, can you share in the chat box the email that colleagues can send the request before I give them a wrong email? There's also a question from Austin. Can one raise capital in VFX for a company that has not started operations yet, like a SPAC? So we are also working on improving our rules. So currently, I'll say there's no provision for SPACs in our listings requirements, but it's an area which we have been engaged by other interested parties before. So we are also working on that. So very soon we'll have provisions for the listing of SPACs, but currently we don't have provisions for that. Just to reiterate, I think Tapua has shared the email, so you can send a request for the slides to tbepe@vfx.exchange. I'll repeat that email again, tbepe@vfex.exchange. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. We've come to the end of this masterclass. If you've got questions, please feel free to send them to that email. Thank you and have a good day.
Okay, thank you.